Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, Ed Dentzel. I hope everybody's having a great holiday week. I'll have you know, I got to see the movie The Force Awakens, the Star Wars movie. And so I'm going to start out the show. No, I'm not going to give any spoilers away. I wouldn't do that to you. Maybe somewhere way down the road, maybe it'll come back up when I can be assured that more people have seen it. But I got to see it. Pretty average. Pretty average. Definitely better than the three movies from the early 2000s, the prequels. There were maybe 3 or 4 good parts in the new movie. The rest of it, I heard somebody or read something online that said that this movie kind of was like a Mad Lib. You know what a Mad Lib is? Where there's a series of words and then there's blanks in between, and you're supposed to put a noun here, a verb there, an adjective here, a number here. That's what this movie felt like. And the movie that it copies off of is the first Star Wars movie from 1977, Star Wars A New Hope, whatever you want to call it, Episode 4. And Episode 4 is in a completely different galaxy as far as quality compared to this one. It's not even close. I was telling a friend of mine that the first 3 movies, to me, out of 10, are about an 8.5. I still think the first movie is the best one. I'm not one of these people that thinks that Empire Strikes Back is the best. But I'd give Star Wars a 9, and Empire Strikes Back maybe an 8.25, and Return of the Jedi a 7 3/4 or something like that. They're definitely all above 7s to me, even with the Ewoks. The prequels from the early 2000s, Attack of the Clones, all that, probably average about to a 4. Maybe a 3 to a 4 out of 10 to me. And this movie is like a 6 out of 10. Which isn't, you don't want to get a 60% on a test anywhere, because that's barely passing usually. So this movie barely passes. The best parts about the movie are the old characters. Han Solo, Princess Leia, Chewbacca. I think that the new girl did a fine job, but truthfully, I didn't think she was given much. The new characters, I don't know. They certainly don't grow on you like Luke Skywalker, Han Solo did, Chewbacca, Princess Leia did, Darth Vader, Ben Kenobi, like they did back in 1977. That is for sure. So I wouldn't necessarily say that I was let down. It just wasn't, I didn't think it was really that good. All these fanboys out there, you can see them on YouTube going crazy about it. Not true. So there's my review. Before I get started, speaking of entertainment, you can go to Amazon.com and find my books there. Edward Dentzel, just do a search for my name. You can download my books to your Kindle in a matter of moments. It's science fiction with a little conservatism mixed in. You can go, you can email me at edwarddentzel@reagan.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Dentzel Domain, all one word, no space in between. edwarddentzel.com is my website. Go there, find my old Red State Talk Radio shows. You can see my highlight reel. You can sign up to get a free first chapter of my next book, The Comebacks, there. So you can find edwarddentzel.com/book for that. You can also find my shows at Podbean, SoundCloud, and the iTunes Store. You can find my shows on YouTube now, at least the most recent shows. Like maybe the last 4 or 5 shows just started doing that. And you can also find me on LinkedIn and on Facebook. Let's get to the show. I want to start with a story that I had yesterday. And it kind of goes along with that little bit that I mentioned regarding National Review and Kevin Williamson, the article that he had out about how Democrats are just, totally out of the closet now, loving totalitarianism. And if you forgot what I said yesterday, he made the point about how Democrats want to repeal the First Amendment. They're assaulting student journalists, want to imprison global warming skeptics. They use the IRS and the ATF to harm their political enemies. Well, this is kind of like that story, and it has to do with the singer Nicki Minaj. I'm not going to go into her whole musical repertoire. You can look her up for yourself. Let's just put it that way. I guess the real shame of this is the kind of music she does is somewhat R-rated. But I've heard her sing, and she actually really does have real talent. If she'd just stick to her real talent instead of the other stuff that she sticks to. Well, she went and did a concert in Angola. They've had a dictator there since 1979. His name, Jose Eduardo dos Santos. He has a daughter, Isabel dos Santos, running this fiefdom there since, like I said, 1979. Nicki Minaj went there, got paid to do a concert for the dictator, and while she was there, she took pictures with the dictator. And this is not the first case of a pop star going to a dictator-led country, a totalitarian country, and taking big bucks to put on private concerts for dictators and getting big dollars. I think Nicki Minaj's case, she made $2 million doing that. And she has gotten a lot of crap since then. And she's just, I guess you could call it, turning into the curve by just telling all of her critics to shut up. She's going to do what she wants. Do these people really not know? Now, in the case of other singers who have done this, Beyonce got caught up in this. Mariah Carey got caught up in this. Those ones, once they were called out on it, ended up giving what they got paid to charity. The question I have is, do these people really, really not know? Do these performers really not know? And I just happen to be mentioning women here. There have been male performers that have done this as well. Do they really not know? Because that's what they claim. See, what it seems to me is going on, except in Nicki Minaj's case, who she just doesn't seem to care. It seems to me, I think they know exactly what they're doing. And they're hoping to get away with it. And then when they get called out, they know if they get called out on it, they can just claim that, oh, it was my manager. Hey, I just show up and sing. You don't expect me to know world politics, do you? But to make this right, I'm just going to donate this money to some charity, which is their own charity anyway. Shouldn't it be in something like that if you get paid by a dictator to perform, you shouldn't be the one that gets to determine where your money goes? If you truly want to give it up, shouldn't you make it up to somebody else? Make it up to somebody else. Isn't that kind of self-serving? That these people get to give it to charity and then on top of it get to write it off on their taxes? Seems a little weird, doesn't it? So even when they claim that they don't know any of this, in the end, they still kind of get out of it. They still get some sort of benefit from it. Go there, hobnob. See, this is different, for example, being a child of the 80s. Thinking about those bands that went behind the Iron Curtain. And I've told you that I've been listening to a lot of Iron Maiden recently. In fact, not only that, I've been watching a lot of Bruce Dickinson, their lead singer's interviews with him. Because he's a businessman too. He's a pilot. He owns an aviation company. Fascinating guy. He is the British version of Gene Simmons. Gene Simmons, not just a rock and roller, businessman, entrepreneur. I can never say that word. Bruce Dickinson is a version of that in England. And they went behind the Iron Curtain. They went to Poland sometime in the 80s. A little different, though. They didn't hang out with any communists. While they were there, they represented the West in freedom, and the freedom of expression, and the freedom of speech. In fact, I would say that there, as far as musical forms go, no other form of music has done more to battle communism, socialism in this world than rock and roll / heavy metal. That's the truth. And the more you find out about these guys that have been making this music for decades, the more you find out, you know what? A lot of them are conservative. It's really weird. I got to tell you, after in the 80s, so many Christians, so many Christian conservatives being afraid of these guys in the 80s. Now you find out when they're older, they've kind of been businessmen, conservatives the whole time. It's just a show. That's all it is. And I consider myself a Christian. I consider myself a conservative. That so many of my fellow Christian conservatives couldn't see that is a little strange to me. But it's a little different when they were going behind the Iron Curtain, representing the West, and not necessarily being welcomed in. These 21st century performers, these pop performers, they are being invited by the dictators. It would be like if Leonid Brezhnev invited Iron Maiden to go play at the Kremlin. That never happened. And dare I say it, I don't think that group would have done it. Or any of the other groups that went behind the Iron Curtain in the 1980s. They wouldn't have done it. But things have changed. And you know all of these performers who have done this, they're all Democrats. We maybe can start thinking about music, pop music these days. You might find a Republican here and there, a conservative here and there. There aren't many of them, of course. But have any of them ever gone to Angola? Have they ever been invited there and played? Have any conservative performers ever been invited by a dictator to play somewhere, get paid, hobnob with that dictator for a few days, put it on Instagram, put it on Twitter, put it on their Facebook page, and brag about it? No. Hasn't happened. There is just, if you look at this deep enough, what is the fascination that Democrats have with dictators? This is more than just pop music stars that have these feelings. Why do you think who do you think buys Che Guevara shirts? Not Republicans, not conservatives. Democrats love that guy. Love Castro. Love Daniel Ortega. That's really pulling the name out of the past. Is Daniel Ortega's name going to get mentioned on any other conservative talk show this week in the United States? Probably not. It's probably the only place you're going to hear Daniel Ortega's name. I think of it because I remember back in the 80s when he used to, even as a teenager, I remember him coming to New York City, the media loving him, he and his wife going shopping. Democrats loved them. They love dictators. That's why they go play for them. That's why they love Barack Obama and what he's been doing. They love it. Fascinated with them. Just love the power, love the prestige. And I don't think that they're getting the wool pulled over their eyes, to use a horrible cliche, at all. I think they know exactly what's going on in these countries. And they do it anyway. This is what makes them so dangerous. It's that sort of fascination. It's not necessarily Obamacare, even though that's horrible. It's not necessarily illegal immigration. That's horrible. It's that they are fascinated with dictators and they love dealing with them. And they love placating with them. And they love agreeing with them. What do you think the Iran deal is? Nicki Minaj going to play Angola is just another form of Barack Obama dealing with Iran and giving them everything that they wanted. There is something about liberals that in their DNA, in the environment that they've been in their lives, that they look at men and women who rule with an iron fist and love it. How do you think that a musical about Eva Perón gets made, huh? A woman who she and her husband destroyed. I did that story a couple weeks ago. Argentina. Argentina, at one point in the history of the world, was the second richest country in the world. In the world. Not in South America, not in the Western Hemisphere, in the world. More richer than England, richer than Germany, all of them. And she and her husband destroyed that country in less than a decade. And she gets a musical made after her. That's liberalism for you. So this goes back many years. I think Evita came out, in the 50s or something? And then there was the movie with Madonna that came out, I'm going to say, in the 90s. They love these people. That's why we have to beat them. It's not just necessarily any particular policy position. It's they have a fascination with evil. So that's the story that caught my mind. And I also had to talk about this story because somebody on my timeline on Twitter did not like me pointing out this story. I pointed the story out on my Twitter feed yesterday, but didn't get to it in my show. And somebody pointed out that I should not be posting a story about Nicki Minaj. If you're a true conservative, you wouldn't post a story about her on your timeline. Well, if the person took the time to read the story comes from National Review is where I got this story, and it's not flattering to her at all. If anybody would take the time. But I just wanted to get to that, just a good representation about how Democrats love dictators. Let's move on to something else. 6 service members were killed in Afghanistan yesterday, day before. A suicide bomb, guy on a motorcycle blew himself up. 6 NATO members, they all happen to be American service members. And there were some others that were injured. One of the dead is a New York City detective. He was over there, had done a couple tours in Afghanistan going years back, had done a tour in Iraq, and then his unit, I guess, was back in Afghanistan again. And now he's dead. Here we are, over 14 years after September 11th, and service members are still getting killed in Afghanistan. The good war, what Democrats would call it. Iraq, bad war. Afghanistan, good war. I remind you that more service members have been killed in Afghanistan since Barack Obama took office than when George W. Bush was in office. Now, it should be noted that the peak of American military members in Afghanistan, it reached its peak in 2009 while Barack Obama was president. But I'm going to guess that that was a decision that was made while George W. Bush was still in office. Then slowly over the years, it's kind of gone down to the point that now we have about 10,000 service members in Afghanistan. And you know what? Nobody ever talks about it. It's like to our president, it's like it doesn't exist. I don't even want to... A lot of conservative sites today made the point, well, these members got killed and here he is going golfing. You know my attitude. I wish he had been golfing every day since he became president. I wish he never went to the White House. I wish he never gave his State of the Union speeches. I wish he never took any other trips on Air Force One. If he would have just golfed for this first 7 years, the United States would be much better off. That's the way I look at it. And so I'm not going to give him a hard time about that. I'm more concerned about how he never mentions. If you followed the president and what he's been saying the last few years, you'd think nobody was there. You'd think not one service member. You'd think it was like Iraq, where we just have a very few service members there allegedly helping out the Iraqis. I don't know how well that's going. But you wouldn't even know it. Never talks about it. You'd think, and who was this done by? It wasn't done by ISIS. It wasn't done by Al-Qaeda. It was done by the Taliban. The people who were there in the first place when we got there back in 2001. Now, dare I say it, when we went into Afghanistan, what would that have been, November? Wasn't long after September 11th that we start sending troops in there. If you'd have told somebody in November 2001, 14 years from now, service members are still going to be getting killed by Taliban in Afghanistan, the person would have said, man, that's really weird. I just don't know if I can believe that. Well, it's happening. And it's going to continue to happen. I just don't think that we've fixed that situation there at all. And we are so concerned with ISIS, which right at this time does seem to be a bigger deal. But you see our president's attitude toward ISIS, then it's no wonder. I mean, he doesn't even want to talk about ISIS. So it's no wonder that Afghanistan and the Taliban, those words never come out of his mouth either. We just don't win wars anymore. We just don't. We go in, make a good show of it, kill a lot of people, kill a lot of the enemy. Hey, there's no denying that the United States has killed a lot of bad guys in the last 14 years. A lot of them. But you have to win. You know, that's like a football game where you're saying, well, we're piling up lots of yards, just not getting in the end zone very often. Yards don't matter if you don't get in the end zone, and that kind of feels like we're doing. We've piled up a lot of yards in the last 14 years. Haven't scored many touchdowns. And the ultimate touchdown being no more service members dying in these areas. And actually defeating, truly defeating the enemy on the battlefield. We don't do that. We win a little battle here, we win a little battle there, and then we have a president who says, we got to get out of Iraq. Doesn't matter what's going to happen. We need to get out of Iraq. Never wants to think about going in there again. Afghanistan's the good war. That's the war I'm willing to fight. But then he doesn't talk about it at all. Especially if service members die. In fact, Barack Obama himself didn't even have the courtesy to issue condolences himself. He left his press secretary to do that. What's his name? Josh Earnest? Is that his last name, Ernest? That is hilarious. You talk about a great a press secretary with the last name Ernest. That is his name, right? I never heard it hit me till right now. That's funny. But my condolences, I can issue my condolences. I'm not going to say thoughts and prayers, being we know how cliche that is. It's a damn shame that service members are still dying in Afghanistan, especially from the Taliban. After all this time. I'm sure you heard about that story. I needed to talk about it. I wanted to talk about it. And, you know, the interesting thing is, I just see one of my notes here. Back around 2009, I'm going to say it was after Barack Obama became president, I had a conversation with somebody about, and that would have been at the height of when we had the most service members there. Like I said, about 100,000 was the peak. And this person was trying to tell me, well, we need to get out of there. Meanwhile, we're sending people there, and he was saying we need to get people out of there. And it seems that ramp up did do its job. It's when we started ramping down again, it's when we started to pull out, that the problems start all over again. It's the way it seems. Just not serious. Just people just want to make it go away. Just want to forget about it. Get those people like we want to forget about. What do you think? Let's put it this way. What do you think will happen if we got totally out of Afghanistan? We saw what happened in Iraq. And you could say that when we left Iraq, it was in a better situation than Afghanistan is now. So what do you think's going to happen? Probably nothing good. But when I think of this, I think of Ronald Reagan in his Time for Choosing speech about peace. Do you want peace, or do you want to be just left in peace? It seems to me that Democrats just want to be left in peace. They want to put things behind them. They just want to forget about them. That's not true peace. That's just kicking the can down the road, which is another horrible cliche. That's just putting a problem off till later. We know what the problem is. We don't win these wars anymore. They're all based on politics. It's generals deciding, yes, we can bomb here, we can't bomb there. It's service members standing around while Afghan men are raping children, but we can't get involved in that. On and on and on. But you can't leave because you know it's going to get worse than what it is right now. And so you have to stay, but we have a president who doesn't have the courage to fight the war the way it's supposed to be fought. So you get in this kind of purgatory, this war purgatory, where 6 service members get killed by a Taliban suicide bomber 14 years after September 11th. That's why it happens. And people are left asking, how can this happen? It's sad. It really. I feel bad for the families involved, and not just the ones recently, but this isn't the first time this year that service members have been murdered in Afghanistan. But I feel for them. I feel bad for my country when I hear these stories. I feel bad. It's disgusting, which is a word I've used quite a bit recently on this show. And dare I say it, that another type of president would not put up with this. But 6 service members dead, 6 people who should still frankly be alive. Move on to something else before I have to go to the break. I have about a minute and a half. I ran across this story, and this is why you should listen to me all the time. Just don't tune in once a week. You should tune in 5 days a week, because I'm going to let you know about things at least a month before somebody else says it at some other site. And this has to do with Ben Carson. I was perusing, I go to my places, Hot Air, Breitbart, Fox News, The Drudge Report, where I go to get my news. And I go to CNN, I go to the New York Times, I go all over the place. And I ran across Red State, the other Red State, not Red State Talk Radio, but redstate.com. And what do I see? A story by somebody a blogger there, Streiff, Strife? I'm going to just say Strife. And I don't know if it's a man or a woman, saying that, could it be that Ben Carson, this coming apart at the seams of his campaign, was planned all along? Points out this story that Ben Carson raised $8.8 million in October, but spent $9.5 million in October. And given the other comments that he's made, is he trying to undermine himself? And I said this a month ago, and right now it's just getting to redstate.com. But I go to the break. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
Red State Talk Radio. Lock it in and rip the knob off.
I know you're watching, so pay attention. You hate my freedom, my religion, and my country. You hate me for speaking my mind. You try to control me with violence and intimidation. You think you can muzzle me with fear? Don't ever confuse me for my politicians or my media. I am an American, free-born and free-bred, and I will call you out for who you are. An Islamic extremist who would kill me for my beliefs. You don't intimidate me. My freedom is more powerful than anything you can possibly do, and I will never, never surrender my rights to your terror. I will say what I think, worship according to my beliefs, and raise my children how I see fit, and I defend it all with the Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. I cower to no one, because I am the National Rifle Association of America, and I am freedom's safest place.
This is Donna Fiducia. For 26 years, I was a member of the mainstream media, most recently as an anchor at the Fox News Channel. Ladies and gentlemen, the mainstream media has failed you miserably. Red State Talk Radio will not fail you. Tune into Red State Talk Radio at redstatetalkradio.com, the dominant force in conservative Internet talk radio.
I lost my brother Frank in the Battle of Iwo Jima.
He served on 4 combat tours
in Vietnam,
in Iraq,
Afghanistan.
There's a life that was lost behind that pin.
I put it on for my wife,
For my husband,
my brother,
my dad.
My son.
we wear it because we honor those that we lost.
To learn more about the stories behind the Gold Star Pins, visit goldstarpins.org.
This is Jeff Carlisi from the Band 38 Special. You're listening to Red State Talk Radio. Lock it in and rip the knob off.
Back at the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I want to continue to talk about Ben Carson's campaign for a few more minutes. As you know, I haven't been singing, I've never sung the praises of Ben Carson since day one. I can respect him as being somewhat conservative, but going way back to February of this year, I never took him seriously. He was riding the wave of one particular incident within the last few years, and that was that prayer breakfast where Barack Obama was there, Ben Carson was there, and called Barack Obama out on Obamacare. That is what has kept Ben Carson going for this long. That's kind of what put him on the map, and then he started doing some interviews. Early this year, just hearing him speak, I said, this guy does not have it. But here we are all of these months later, after all of you have sent him a bunch of money, which in the end is going to go nowhere. I tried to warn you. All you conservatives out there, you know how I do this show. If you do something wrong, I'm going to call you on it. I tried to tell you. You sending your money to that guy was a waste of time. and waste of your money that you should have saved for Christmas. My opinion would be don't send money to any of these politicians. Let them scrounge it out on their own. But we have what we have now. And by you showing support for him, and not just with money for those of you who didn't send money, but for those of you when you were called and saying, yeah, I'm supporting Ben Carson. Yes, I would vote for Ben Carson if the election were held today. Yes, I'd take Ben Carson over Hillary Clinton. Yes, I'd take Ben Carson over Ted Cruz. Yes, I'd take Ben Carson over Scott Walker, Bobby Jindal, the rest of them. You know what you just did? You put some of those other guys out of business. Guys who were probably more serious about running for president and men who had more ability to run for president. But you were still caught up in what Ben Carson did one time, and frankly, you might have been caught up in his laid-back nature. Never once thinking about, could the guy do the job? So what we have here is Ben Carson self-imploding in Iowa, much to Ted Cruz's benefit. I think a lot of Ben Carson supporters have seen the light regarding him, and now moving over to Ted Cruz, maybe Marco Rubio, to some of the other candidates. But you have to look at the collateral damage. I think it's safe to say that a lot of Ben Carson supporters could have been Scott Walker supporters. A lot of Ben Carson supporters, all of you out there, could have been Bobby Jindal supporters. Or if you want to look at this way, a lot of you Ben Carson supporters for this year could have been Ted Cruz supporters this entire year, or Marco Rubio supporters this entire year. Because it was Ben Carson, in my opinion. He was like the anti-Trump for all those months. But never once did I think that this guy was going to go anywhere. I'm still stunned. You couldn't see that. Couldn't see it. And maybe had you opened your eyes just a little bit more, then Donald Trump wouldn't have gotten out to the lead that he got, that we're still trying to make up after all these months. Instead, had you said, you know what, this Ben Carson guy, nice guy, conservative guy, has helped a lot of people out with his skills as a surgeon, and he should be applauded for all of that. President of the United States, though, I don't think so. But he's gotten your money, he's spent your money, and doesn't have much to show for it. And it's hard to see a way that he can work his way back into this campaign, and I don't think he even wants to do so. As they're saying at redstate.com, it could be that this is all just about the hype. Maybe it really was, as somebody pointed out, not even I got this cynical, but maybe, as somebody said way early this year, maybe this was just all one big book tour. Remember, this is the guy who was caught up in that scandal with those glyconutrients. Remember that? That doesn't sound so crazy now, given that we know how he's been handling his finances for the last so many months. Right? Taking your money and still spending more than he's taking in. I also know, because I'm from the Pittsburgh area, and I don't think that I've mentioned this, that he has a very close connection to a guy that was running a business scam in Pennsylvania. A big business scam where lots of money, ripping off Medicare and Medicaid, faulty billing, making up work that he never did. Ben Carson went to bat for this guy and put in a good word for this guy at his sentencing. Told the people there in Pittsburgh, the judge, that this guy, unfortunately I didn't write it down, was one of the most honest people he knew. That's interesting. He trusts this guy, and he's still very close to this guy who ripped off the government for millions of dollars. But I was saying this about him before I knew about any of this. Just something about him. Now, I will tell you that I had a conversation with somebody recently that says that behind the scenes, Ben Carson gets a lot of support from the Nation of Islam. I don't know that for a fact. But this is somebody who is shown to have some inside knowledge about a lot of different government stuff. I'll have to look into that further, but this is what this person told me. So how do you like that? Once again, I was saying this back in February before I knew any of this. Ben Carson just doesn't have what it takes to run a campaign, doesn't take what it takes to be president, and a lot of other people have suffered because not enough conservatives could see what I saw. And that's too bad, but too late now. Too late now. But I think you let your hearts get in front of your minds, and we should just leave that to liberals. Just leave it to liberals. You saw a nice guy, you wanted to vote for him. That's not enough. Let's move on to something else. Something that I didn't really actually talk enough about last week after the debate. About the debate and after the debate. Was the Jeb attacking of Donald Trump and that back and forth. Mentioned it a little bit, but that's continued to go on since then. That wasn't just something that Jeb Bush and his people decided he was going to do during the debate. He has continued to do that since. Although, on the other hand, he came to Trump's defense regarding Hillary and her contention that ICE is using Trump videos to recruit people. And we may get to that story before the end. But for the most part, it seems like Jeb Bush, among all of the candidates, has decided he is going to be the person that is going to attack Donald Trump. You know, I'm not going to say that I don't like the idea. I just wish it was somebody else doing it. I wish that it was Chris Christie that was going after Donald Trump like Jeb Bush has decided he is going to do. As much as I've talked badly about Ben Carson, I'd rather him do it than Jeb Bush do it. Why? And I could go on and on about who I'd rather have doing this. Jeb Bush doesn't have any credibility. Jeb Bush, it's the last name. And the truth is, and this isn't just because of the polls. This isn't something I think that you need a poll to determine. The given just 6 months ago, before Donald Trump ever jumped into the race, it'd have to be more than 6 months ago, let's say 8 months ago, beginning of this year, if you asked your average Republican, who do you like more, Donald Trump or Jeb Bush, let's say, I think they would have said Donald Trump. I don't like that. I don't really care for either of them. But then you see the problem. If you portray the puzzle that way, you see the issue. You have somebody who's not even liked as much as Donald Trump attacking him. Why? Why is it a problem for Jeb? Because of his last name. I would think, as much as I don't like Jeb Bush on some of his issues, it's his last name that I think really turns people off. I think that if his last name were Smith and he didn't have a brother who had been president of the United States, didn't have a father who had been president of the United States, and didn't have all of that baggage because, in particular, George W. Bush carries around a lot of baggage with him. People start thinking like that. But if it had just been Governor Smith from Florida, fairly conservative, but not as tough on immigration as you'd like, not as tough on Common Core as you'd like, I'm telling you, that Governor Smith from Florida would be doing a lot better than Jeb Bush is doing. And that's why his attacks, I think, on Donald Trump just aren't going anywhere, because people are saying, wait a minute, Jeb Bush is attacking Donald Trump. Jeb Bush, B-U-S-H, almost spelled that wrong, B-U-S-H, is attacking Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump can always say, heck, if it doesn't get any better than when a Bush attacks you. That's where I think we still are, at least a little bit, in the Republican Party. For good reason. And I don't think it has anything to do with Bush's poll numbers or how many, 5% that he gets in these polls. I don't think that has anything to do with it. It's just him. I happen to believe that even if he was polling second to Donald Trump and was attacking him, it would be helping Donald Trump a lot. He's just not the right warrior for this task. And I've told you, and I think this, something I didn't mention on Cowboy Logic last week and something that I haven't mentioned about the debate, I still think that the best way to handle these debates, and if Donald Trump is in the lead, and I would say this if anybody else were in the lead, anybody, that I think that you still just need to go up there and be who you are. I think that's kind of what Chris Christie did, and really did not attack the other guys and didn't attack Carly Fiorina that much, except for that outburst when he was pointing out the craziness of the United States Senate. Chris Christie kept his eye on Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. That's his plan. And you know what? It's a pretty decent plan. Even though I know he's not as conservative as would like. I think that's still the way you have to play it. And that's another reason I think that Jeb Bush is playing this the wrong way. It looks desperate on his part. On top of everything else. He should still be just continuing, despite his low poll numbers, to just talk about himself and what he thinks he can do and talk about Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Because I'm not sure there's any attack that's going to work on Donald Trump. I think that this is something that's just, if it's going to happen and he's going to get the nomination, that's just the way it goes. But I think if he doesn't, it's going to be because of what Donald Trump does to himself. That's the way I see it. And that Jeb Bush's people don't see it that way with all of their experience is a little odd to me. And they don't realize the attitude that your average Republican has toward the Bushes. Not necessarily Jeb Bush, just the Bushes. That by him attacking Donald Trump, it actually gives Donald Trump more credibility. But that's what he's going to do. I think he's going to do it right up through the next debate, whenever that is. He'll probably do it during the debate. And maybe somewhere down deep, Jeb Bush thinks that he can't win now anyway. Maybe he's the guy that needs to be the kamikaze that takes out Donald Trump. Well, dare I say it, that Jeb Bush, if he's trying to take out the USS, the aircraft carrier USS Donald Trump with his Zero, to use a World War II analogy, my odds are that Jeb Bush gets shot down before he gets anywhere close to that carrier, and he just ends up landing in the Pacific Ocean somewhere and not killing anybody but himself. That's my prediction. But I didn't get to that last week. Somehow missed it. Got about 5 minutes left. I want to touch on this. Obama playing the race card. Did an interview recently. And he said, yeah, I understand that a lot of the opposition that I get is because I'm the first black president. Does he believe that? I do this every once in a while, and I ask all of you, does he really believe that? Does he really believe that we oppose him because he happens to be black? And I remind all of you, he's only half black. His father was black, his mother was white. So, the first black president, does he really believe that? Let's put it this way. Does he really think that if he were all white, that conservatives and Republicans would agree with him more? Let me put it that way. I don't know. I don't know whether he believes it or not. I know that he knows that playing the race card works in the 21st century. But I'm trying to figure out, is he playing it because he knows it works, or is he playing it because he believes it? Because I don't know if he's looked closely enough at Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid and Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, but none of them are black, and we oppose them too. Nancy Pelosi may look like she's from another planet, but she's definitely not black. Does he not realize that? Of course, none of these people that get to do a interview with him ever get to come back and say, well, you know that conservatives, they oppose a lot of white Democrats too. You realize that, right? You do remember that there was a lot of opposition to Bill Clinton in the 1990s, and you're already seeing with Hillary Clinton that there's a lot of opposition to her, and she's white. There's a lot of conservative opposition to Bernie Sanders, and he's an old white guy. Why do you in particular think that it's just because of your race? You do realize that if your name was Barry Obama and you were a white guy from Davenport, Iowa, and a Democrat who was president, that they'd still oppose everything that you were doing, right? Does he not realize that? I know I keep asking that to the microphone, but I wonder. But it does show something else, though. It shows that Democrats are never going to admit that the opposition to their policies are based on ideology. It must be something else. You oppose me, well, you oppose me not because of my liberalism, but because I'm a woman. You oppose me because I'm poor. You oppose me because I'm black. It definitely couldn't be because of my liberalism, because we know how perfect liberalism is, how perfect socialism is. So you as conservatives, surely you really don't believe in lowering taxes. You're just saying that to spite us. You really don't believe in being pro-life. You just do that just to be different. It's kind of the feeling to get. If you argue with liberals enough, and I've done that over my life, that's kind of the attitude you get. That they really don't think we believe what we say. And so in the end, they can't believe that we'd be against the government handing out stuff to people. And let me tell you, maybe one of the reasons they continue to believe that is because so many Republicans have gotten caught up in it as well. There's that. Had we been a more steadfast opponents to government handouts instead of this omnibus bill, the omnibus bill makes us look like frauds. Even though I know a lot of conservatives did not vote for it. It's just an interesting question. But you got to remember, they see the opposition to liberalism. They just don't believe it because they believe in what they think so much. Still wondering, though, if he really thinks we're trying to play the race card on him. going to think about that in the show. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio, and I will talk to you again very soon.